Have you ever noticed how a simple, small, affordable payment can transform a moment of achievement into years of financial hardship? It's curious how, in the United States, this scene repeats itself every day. Someone enters a dealership just to take a look, but leaves committed to a debt that will consume a good portion of their salary for much longer than they imagine. The person sees the car shining, smells the new interior, leans behind the wheel, and for a few moments believes they are finally living the American dream. Have you ever experienced this? That feeling of getting a great deal, even without fully understanding what's behind those small, seemingly harmless numbers. The truth is, there's a huge contrast between what you feel at the moment of purchase and what's actually happening behind the scenes. The salesperson smiles, hands over the keys for a test drive, talks about unmissable opportunities, and emphasizes that the monthly payment won't be a burden. Everything seems easy, quick, and accessible. But that's precisely where the danger lies. Because when emotion takes the wheel, reason goes to the back seat, and banks know this perfectly well. What you're about to discover might surprise you because most people don't even realize they're falling into one of the most common financial traps in the country. About 80% of Americans completely ignore the 4-20-10 rule, even though it's one of the simplest and most effective ways to avoid years of struggling with car financing. They go in confident, believing they're in control, but leave with a commitment that, little by little, begins to erode their salary, freedom, and even their peace of mind. It's like signing an invisible contract with stress. Everything seems calm at first, until the bills start arriving and the budget gets increasingly tight. Stick with me until the end, because understanding this first step is essential to avoid falling into the same cycle that traps millions of people for decades. Imagine this scene unfolding before you. Someone walks into the dealership after weeks of hard work, exhausted from the routine, wanting to reward themselves. The car is there, immaculate, the lights highlighting every detail, and their mind immediately conjures up a perfect movie about how life will improve with that purchase. The salesperson notices, approaches, and repeats the script that works with almost everyone. Today, I can give you a special price. At that moment, nobody is thinking about interest, amortization, depreciation, or the hidden fees in the contract. The person just wants to feel like they're winning, that they're moving forward, that they can finally have what they've always wanted. But while this feeling grows, the silent problem also grows. The installments may seem small, but added to the long-term interest rates, because almost no one follows the 4-year term recommended by the 24-10 rule, they turn the car into a financial drain where money slips away without the owner realizing it. And banks work precisely with this idea, making you believe you're getting a good deal, while they ensure you pay not just for one car, but for 2 or 3 over the course of the financing. And here's a crucial point that almost no one mentions. If you truly believe you're in control when you sign a financing agreement, wait until you see what happens behind the scenes. It's in the contract details, the fees, the interest rates, and the small numbers that the real cost emerges, and it's usually much higher than the salesperson led you to believe. This is the part that transforms the dream of a new car into a long, silent, and exhausting financial nightmare. And that's exactly why understanding the beginning of this journey is so important. Because how someone enters the dealership says a lot about how they'll leave it months later when reality hits. Now I want to take you even deeper into this subject. And as this reality begins to emerge, many people realize they weren't as prepared as they thought to handle the emotional and financial burden that follows. It's precisely at this point that many people look back and ask themselves, how did I fall into this? And perhaps you felt something similar too. In fact, if this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you most so far. Whether it's an experience you've lived through, a situation you've witnessed happening to someone close to you, or even an autotip feeling that arose while listening to this story. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people in the United States who are going through the same challenges and need to hear this kind of truth that often no one speaks openly about. And I say this with complete sincerity. Each like you give helps the algorithm understand that this is content that deserves to be delivered to more people. It seems simple, almost small, but it has a huge impact on the continuity of the channel and the strength of this conversation we are building together. So, if up to this point you felt that something in this narrative opened your eyes to the pitfalls of crowdfunding, leave a like. Not as an automatic gesture, but as a real way to show that this message needs to reach those who are being deceived by the same idea of a small installment that fits in your pocket. And of course, if you're here for the first time, or if you enjoy this kind of mind-opening content that exposes the hidden truths of the financial system and shows how small decisions can completely change your trajectory, take advantage and subscribe to the channel. This way you can continue following each new video, each new reflection, and each new story that helps you make more conscious, intelligent, and liberating decisions. In the end, creating this community is what makes all of this stronger, a place where ordinary people can learn, share, and avoid costly mistakes. And while you think about all of this, about your own decisions, and about how this cycle silently begins, there's something even deeper about this journey that we need to explore. When someone ignores the 4-20-10 rule, they're not just making a thoughtless financial decision, they're opening the door to a silent journey where math becomes a relentless adversary. It's curious how, here in the United States, this happens on such a large scale that it almost seems normal. A person finances a car without a down payment, stretches the term as much as possible to make the payment fit their budget, and believes they've found a smart solution. But in reality, they've just started a process where they'll pay the equivalent of 2 or even 3 cars for the price of one, without immediately realizing the impact of this choice. There's a hidden truth in this type of financing that's rarely explained. The longer the term, the higher the interest rate, and the slower the outstanding balance decreases. And that's precisely why, even paying every month, the debt seems to stand still. What makes this situation even more complex is that the car begins to lose value the moment it leaves the dealership. Depreciation is rapid, aggressive, and inevitable. Meanwhile, the debt doesn't keep pace. It moves slowly, as if trapped in quicksand. In just a few weeks, the vehicle is already worth less than what the bank says you still owe. And the most interesting, or frightening thing, is that this is only the first chapter of the problem. Because when the market value falls faster than the value of the debt, you become trapped in a kind of financial submersion, where any attempt to sell or trade in the car generates immediate losses. This becomes one of the biggest drains on American family budgets, siphoning off resources that could be used to build stability, security, and even growth opportunities. And the more time passes, the more distorted this relationship becomes. The accumulated interest means that a large part of the payment goes only to keep the debt alive, without actually paying it off. It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. You strain, put in money, dedicate yourself, but the result is much less than the effort. This feeling of financial stagnation affects your mindset, erodes your confidence, and creates the impression that the problem lies with you, when in reality, it's in the system. It's a mechanism designed so that you don't realize how much more you're paying. And since nobody explains this clearly, many people continue to believe they are on the right track, when in fact they are trapped in a cycle that only exists because almost everyone makes the same choice. The most ironic part is that this cycle doesn't begin with one gigantic mistake, but rather with small decisions made in haste. Accepting financing without understanding the amortization, trusting the small installment, ignoring the down payment, believing that longer terms are easier to manage. All of this creates a sum that weighs much more than it seems. And when the person realizes it, they are already committed for 4, 5, 6 years, sometimes even longer. It's a situation that not only compromises the present, but also limits future choices, because the money that should be free ends up tied up in something that continually loses value. And behind all of this lies a point that almost no one discusses. Owing more than the car is worth is one of the biggest emotional and practical obstacles for those trying to reorganize their finances. It's like carrying a heavy backpack that can't be dropped. The more you try to walk, the more it pulls you back. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this dynamic is essential to seeing what really happens when a poorly structured loan starts controlling your decisions. Comment below. This makes sense to me. It's curious how, once someone is trapped in a loan that isn't decreasing, difficult to explain restlessness arises. Even owing more than the car is worth, even knowing that the debt is slowly decreasing, that almost automatic feeling appears that maybe it's time to change cars. It's as if the mind is trying to find an emotional outlet for something that started wrong from the beginning. In the United States, this happens all the time. The person is still far from paying off the vehicle, but they already start looking at newer, faster, more attractive models, as if a better car would erase the frustration of the previous loan. And that's the first psychological trap. The exchange doesn't solve anything. It only restarts the cycle, but at an even more unfavorable point. Because by handing over a car worth less than the debt, you carry over a negative balance to the next contract, which is added to the new loan, creating a snowball effect that no one sees growing until it's too late. And when a person realizes they are trapped, the second trap emerges. The illusion of refinancing as a lifesaver. It's impressive how comfortable, almost comforting that word sounds, like a magic button that rearranges everything. But refinancing rarely means solving the problem. Most of the time, it means extending the problem, lengthening the interest, spreading the debt over a longer period, and making the total cost even higher. It's like sweeping dust under the rug. It looks clean on top, but the dirt is still there, accumulating. What was meant to relieve emotional pressure ends up becoming a new contract that ties down the future, reduces opportunities, and leaves the person with the feeling that they can no longer control any part of their own financial life. And as if that weren't enough, there's an invisible force at work all the time. Social pressure, comparison with others, feelings of inadequacy, the silent need to show that you're doing well. Here in the United States, this culture is even stronger. Big cars, the latest models, brands that symbolize status. Many people don't want the car because they need it, but because they fear what others will think if they drive something simpler. This mentality creates impulsive decisions that have nothing to do with real need and everything to do with insecurity disguised as ambition. And so, once again, the person enters into a contract that will suffocate them for years to come, believing they are making a good decision, when in reality, they are only feeding a cycle that drains money, energy, and even self-esteem. The saddest part is that this cycle repeats itself silently, year after year. The person trades in their car, refinances, trades it in again, extends the term, accepts high interest rates, believes in easy solutions, and ends up trapped in a journey of stagnation. And each repetition exacts a high price, not just financial, but emotional and human. It's not just money, it's wasted time. Time that could be used to build financial independence, alleviate family stress, and fulfill dreams that truly matter. But as long as the mindset remains stuck on the idea that a better car solves everything, the cycle continues, fueled by the same seductive narrative. And behind this repetition lies an even more unsettling revelation. The more a person tries to escape without changing their mindset, the more the system ensnares them. It's like trying to run on a treadmill. There's movement, there's effort, but no real progress. The decisions seem different, but the result is always the same. Heavy installments, long-term interest, growing regret, and a constant feeling that financial life is stuck. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this psychological mechanism is essential to seeing how this cycle transforms into a labyrinth where many wander for years without realizing. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. When a person finally realizes they're trapped in this exhausting cycle of debt, swapping, and refinancing a salary, question arises that completely changes the course of their journey. Is there a simple, practical, and realistic way to avoid all of this? And this is where the 4-20-10 rule appears as that compass that almost no one uses, but which could have prevented much of the financial stress that so many American families face every year. The interesting thing is that this rule isn't complicated, doesn't require advanced calculations, and doesn't depend on luck. It depends only on mindset and more. Conscious decisions. It's almost ironic to realize that while so many people seek miraculous solutions, the real solution has always been there. Discreet, ignored, like a hidden truth that no one bothers to explain properly. The first part of the rule is simple: 20% down payment. This changes everything because it creates immediate protection against that initial period when the car depreciates rapidly. Putting in a solid down payment means starting the financing process ahead, not behind. It means reducing the financed amount, paying less interest, and decreasing the risk of owing more than the vehicle is worth. It's a choice that directly impacts financial security. And, above all, the peace of mind of not always having to chase after losses. Many people in the United States don't follow this advice because they want the quick feeling of getting the car today. But this haste turns into months, sometimes years, of financial strain. The down payment is the first shield against this. The second part of the rule is the term, a maximum of 4 years. In a country where financing terms of 5, 6, 7, and even 8 years are pushed as if they were incredible opportunities, this recommendation seems almost radical. But it is precisely because it is different that it works. Short terms prevent the excessive accumulation of interest, stop the debt from going in circles, and allow you to see the outstanding balance truly decrease. It's a matter of changing your mindset. Instead of thinking, how can I pay the lowest possible installment? The question becomes, how can I get rid of this debt quickly and at the lowest cost? And this subtle change makes a huge difference in the final result. The third part is equally powerful. The installment cannot exceed 10% of your net salary. This creates a healthy limit, consistent with a balanced financial life. When the installment stays within this percentage, the car ceases to be a permanent burden and becomes merely a tool, a means of transportation, and not a drain on emotional and monetary energy. This barrier protects against impulses, against decisions made in the heat of the moment, against financing that seems affordable on paper, but becomes a burden in practice. It's a rule that returns control to you, not the bank. When these three elements come together, the effect is immediate. Lower interest rates, less stress, less dependence on refinancing, less risk of going bankrupt. And how does all this translate into real life? Into freedom, into peace of mind, into better choices for the future. Because in the end, it's not about having less, it's about having peace and freedom. And financial freedom doesn't come from driving the most expensive car, but from knowing that it's not taking away what you spent months building. This shift in mindset is the point at which many things begin to change. The person realizes they no longer need to play the game of appearances, that they don't need to prove anything to anyone, that they don't need to repeat the cycle they already know so well. And when this understanding strengthens, space opens up for new decisions, new possibilities, and a more conscious journey. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding how this rule changes the game is just the beginning of a much greater revelation about financial independence. Comment below. This makes sense to me. When the truth begins to fit into our own story, something changes inside. It's almost as if a light turns on in the background of the mind, revealing that many of the decisions we made in the past weren't due to fault, lack of intelligence, or inability. They were simply choices made in moments of emotion, in phases of life when we just wanted to feel like we were moving forward. And everyone goes through this at some point. No one is immune. In the United States or anywhere else, the system is designed to push you towards impulse, not strategy. Therefore, this turning point doesn't require perfection. It requires awareness. It requires a moment of pause, of deep breathing, where you look at your current car, at the monthly payment, at the weight it places on your budget, and realize that that feeling of tightness isn't just financial. It's emotional too. This is when the question arises that separates those who remain in the cycle from those who begin a real transformation. Does this car represent freedom or too high a price? For my peace of mind? Because when the monthly payments suffocate you, when the debt doesn't decrease, when the financing shapes your decisions, it ceases to be a vehicle and becomes a commitment that drives you. And this impacts everything. The stress at the end of the month, the fear of unforeseen events, the apprehension about taking on new plans, the feeling of always being in a rush. True change begins when you embrace this hidden truth. It's not about the car. It's about taking control of your own life. It's about not allowing something that loses value to determine the pace of your future. And when you look closely at this relationship, you realize there's a very fine line between comfort and imprisonment. Sometimes it's so subtle that we only notice it years later, when we look back and see how much money, energy, and time were consumed by contracts that seemed harmless. And that's why this reflection isn't just rational, it's emotional, human. Many people feel ashamed to admit they made the wrong choice. But the truth is that this feeling doesn't change anything. What changes is the decision you make from now on. Because financial liberation doesn't happen with big dramatic leaps. but with small, consistent steps that begin with an internal choice. Letting emotion rest and letting strategy take the wheel. And when that turning point happens, something inside you reorganizes itself. You realize you don't need to prove anything to anyone, that you don't need to keep up with the race of appearances, that you don't need to go into debt to seem successful. The feeling of freedom isn't in a nice car, the latest model, or a chrome emblem. True freedom doesn't come from driving a nice car, but from not owing anything to anyone. This phrase, when truly understood, changes how you see every decision from now on. It changes your relationship with money. It changes the weight your car has in your life. And above all, it changes how you see yourself within your own journey. And it is at this point that many people finally understand that it's not just about finances, it's about identity, emotional security, building a path where every decision carries meaning. It is in this next step, when you face your current reality honestly, that a new perspective is born. A perspective that we will explore even further. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a very important detail that completes this internal change and transforms the way you face the future. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. And if you've made it this far, you can tell that this topic really resonates with some aspect of your life. So, before we wrap up, let me ask you something very simply and sincerely. If this video helped you see your own relationship with your car and with money in a different way, consider subscribing to the channel. We continue building this space precisely for those seeking clarity, strategy, and that financial peace that nobody teaches, but everyone deserves to experience. And so I know you've been on this whole journey with me. Leave the following phrase in the comments. That message was for me. This way, I can identify who is truly committed to transforming their own mindset and continue this conversation in more depth in future videos. If you'd like to leave a like, feel free. It's not just an automatic gesture. It's a way of showing that this content resonated with you, and that helps us keep this exchange alive, light and genuine here. And hey, before you go, there's a video over here that perfectly complements what we talked about today. Click on it and stay with me there, because this journey still has a lot of important things to reveal.